Thank you everybody for coming. I hope you've been getting out during this beautiful spring, even though it's a little warmer than it ought to be and a little drier, quite drier than it ought to be. Tonight I'm going to talk about California's oaks and some of the many organisms that associate with them and depend on them. I'll talk mainly about tree oaks rather than scrub and shrubby oaks because the tree oaks are the ones I know best. And I've gone a little crazy trying to put this slideshow together because there are so many fascinating things I want to talk about, and I go down rabbit holes and then suddenly my talk is too long and then I have to go back and delete and reorganize. So when during this talk I refer you to my book, it's not because I'm trying to get you to buy it, although I would love it if you did, if you don't have it. I just want you to know that there's more really exciting stuff in there that I can't fit into this hour. It took me 5 years to write that book, and it's a little hard to condense it into an hour. And I'd also like to point out this lovely painting by Anne McGlinty. This is the cover painting, and any other paintings that you see in the slideshow are by her. And I want to credit this world-class bird, the Acorn Woodpecker, because this bird is really what inspired my book. I also want to say that any photographs that you see in this slideshow that aren't credited, a lot of them are mine, but there might be some that are yours that I've lost track of over the years of who took the photograph. So if you see a photograph by yourself, please go to my website and let me know. And I'll credit it in the next version of the slideshow. I also just want to say that I'm a little, I'm not at the top of my game tonight. There aren't going to be a whole lot of jokes and poems because I've just recently received news that the land that I've lived on for 20 years and the land that gave birth to my book is being sold. So I've been having to deal with that, and I'm trying to find a conservation-minded buyer for it. I don't own it. And I'm going to talk about that a little more at the end. So oaks appear in California's fossil record about 50 million years ago. And by 20 million years ago, they're pretty similar to the 22 species we have in California today. And some of those are endemic, which means they are native only to California or the California floristic province, which includes California and a little bit of Southwest Oregon and a little bit of northern Baja. The oak in this photo, blue oak, is endemic to California. And that's about 2 miles from where I live. So also I wanted to say, I forgot to say, if you'd like to be on my email list for the talks I give, you can also go to my website and go to the contact page. And my website address is here in this slide. Is just myname.com. So this blue oak and all oaks anchor a rich biotic community consisting of the tree itself plus countless microorganisms, fungi, lichens, insects, reptiles, amphibians, birds, mammals, and other plants that associate with it. Many of these organisms just partake of the oak's bounty, like eating acorns and leaves and flowers. Others are beneficially symbiotic with it. A few are parasitic or hemiparasitic on it, and a huge number of animal species come to oaks just to forage on them because there are so many other organisms on them. So what's going on right out there right now? Raise your hand if you know what deciduous oaks are doing right now. Well, good, that's a lot of people. I guess that's because a lot of you are in CNPS. So where I live, they're just starting to leaf out and flower. These are the male flowers, the pollen-producing flowers, or catkins, of California black oak, Quercus cologii, which is endemic to the California floristic province. And catkins are usually associated with wind-pollinated plants, and it's thought that oaks are wind-pollinated because they bloom in early spring when there aren't a lot of insects around, although there are quite a few now because it's so warm. So most of the oaks we see throughout California's valleys and hills have been planted by one species. And just think a moment, do you know what you're going to see next in the next slide? What species that is? It's the California scrub jay. Now, I have long known that these birds co-evolved with oaks, and that's why the California scrub jay was split off from two other jay species in California a couple years ago because of its specific adaptations to oaks. But I was just astonished to learn from Doug Tallamy, and there'll be more about him later, that jays' relationships with oaks began about 60 million years ago with their ancestors. Guess where? In Southeast Asia. So I guess what that means, I didn't realize this, that all jays have co-evolved with oaks, but our California scrub jay is more involved with them, at least, than the other two jays in California, Stellar's and Woodhouse's jays. You can see it in their behaviors and in the shape of their bills, which are curved downward, and they have a hook on the tip, which you can't see in this picture, but you'll see in the next one. And so the shape makes these bills ideal for tugging acorns off of twigs, carrying them, and cracking them open, or ripping them open, as I read. This jay is removing leaves. You can see its bill is on the petiole of a leaf there, before it either eats this acorn, it might hold hammer it open on this spot, on this limb, or it might fly away to bear with it, and this is a valley oak acorn, might fly away with it to bury it. Scrub jays eat acorns, but they more than make up for the acorns they eat by planting them. Each jay buries about 5,000 acorns in the ground every fall, and they're usually buried far from the mother tree, so they have a better chance of germinating and thriving. The jays always planned to come back and eat them later, but you know how best laid plans go, and a lot of these acorns end up staying in the ground uneaten, and many of those germinate. So I know that not everybody has warm, fuzzy feelings towards scrub jays, but if it might warm you up to them to realize that they have planted tens of thousands of acorns on burned lands in recent years. And if that doesn't do it for you, please just contemplate their beauty or their intelligence, which is equal to or greater than that of chimpanzees, or their gender equal relationships and the melodious love songs they sing to each other, females singing as well as males, which is unusual in bird species. And the females also tender, choice little morsels of food to their prospective mates or their actual mates during their annual vow renewal ceremonies. So according to Doug Tallamy, in his new book that just came out 2 days ago, The Nature of Oaks, the Rich Ecology of Our Most Essential Tree, and Doug Tallamy is an entomologist and wildlife ecologist at the University of Delaware. According to him, by planting oaks, jays are doing the best possible thing to create diverse and vibrant ecosystems. I haven't read his book yet, but I read in the front page New York Times article yesterday that he said something that many of us have long suspected, Oaks support more life forms than any other tree in North America. So what's with oaks? Why are they our most essential trees? Well, they are large, they live long. We even have one here that in a valley oak out near Willits that is 800 years old. And when oaks are 20 to 30 years old, they have to wait that long, they start producing acorns. And they're so good at that, according to Ptolemy, that a single oak can produce 3 million acorns in its lifetime. So do you know what acorns these are? What kinds they are? They are all black oak acorns. And it would just be obvious to you at a glance if you had learned to identify acorns and oaks. So acorns provide carbohydrates, fats, and protein to a vast variety of animal species, from insects and rodents to birds and bears and humans. They indirectly become food for countless carnivores like mountain lions and eagles, who don't eat acorns themselves, but eat other animals that eat acorns. So here is a golden eagle going after a ground squirrel, and here is one carrying a ground squirrel away. If you look right in here, you can see that kind of speckledy fur that a ground squirrel has. And ground squirrels are major consumers of acorns, and golden eagles are major consumers of ground squirrels. So acorns, which are produced in the canopies of oaks, are one of the 3 legs of the tripod that make oaks our most essential tree. The second is the living oak leaves, the alive oak leaves, of which there are hundreds of thousands on a mature tree. Many insects eat these leaves, but those with the greatest biomass and nutrient density and impact on the ecosystem are caterpillars, which are the larvae of moths and butterflies. And pretty soon, in April, tens of thousands of them per tree will hatch out of eggs and begin devouring oak leaves, methodically munching away, molting, pooping, and dropping from silk threads. I'm sure all of you have seen that, a tiny little green caterpillar hanging from a thread. And in the course of a few weeks, they will grow up to 1,000 times larger than they were when they started eating, after they first hatched out. Doug Ptolemy calls caterpillars repurposed leaves that can walk. And I'd add to that can walk and poop and pupate. Nationwide, oaks are the best caterpillar hosts of any tree or shrub. 897 caterpillar species feed on oak leaves. I don't know the numbers in California, but it's a lot. I'd guess 300 or more, 400 maybe. And you don't need to worry about oaks getting denuded by caterpillars. They have co-evolved with them, and oaks actually have 2 sets of backup leaf buds that they call on when too much of the canopy has been eaten. So a certain percentage of the canopy gets eaten, the oak secretes some hormones, and a whole new flush of leaves happens. If those leaves get eaten, the same thing happens again. And the thing is, most of these hordes of caterpillars also get repurposed into other animals, and especially songbirds. This robin is carrying moth caterpillars to her babies, and if her babies don't get enough moth caterpillars, they might starve to death. Our CNPS chapter created an interpretive panel for a local park, 2 panels actually, one on serpentine flowers. We have a place called Serpentine Hill, and so one's about the blooms that occur there every spring, And then the other one is about birds of the Oak Woodlands. So we came up with this catchy heading to go on the panel. Caterpillars turn into birds. Oh, I forgot the first quote on that. And caterpillars also turn into bird song. And I'm gonna see if I can get this to open. There we go, whoops. This is a black-headed grosbeak singing. And that's this bird right here. So the next critical piece of all of this, hope you can hear me over that, is that caterpillars and many other insects can eat only native plants or their close relatives. If you plant non-natives, most of them won't host any caterpillars, and you won't be attracting or supporting butterflies or moths or birds or anyone else up the food chain. And to learn more about this, you can read Talamy's book, or for a quick and free introduction, any of Talamy's books. They're all great. Bringing Nature Home, and you'll find them online. But I also have a page on my website that, if you can see this, there's right here, there's a link that I just kind of stuck in there. I don't really know what I'm doing as a web worker very well, but you can click on that link. It will open. It's called Restore Insects, and there's a whole page of explaining what the problem is, what the issues are, what the solutions are, and giving you a lot of links. And there's a good list of native plants to plant for caterpillars, at least in these North Bay counties. And there's also a link to calscape.org, the absolutely phenomenal Native Plant Society website, where you can find everything you need, including you can put in your zip code and find out what all the plants are that are native to your zip code. You can find out which ones, you can open a link for trees and for shrubs, and you can also go to an advanced search place and find out which ones are good for moths and butterflies. And then on that page, you can, it'll say, like for manzanita, it'll say 47 moths and butterflies likely use common manzanita as a host plant. And then you can click on Show All, and you can actually see photos of every single one of those moths or butterflies. It's amazing. And by the way, there are more butterflies than moths, so we really have to think of ourselves as gardening for moths. I usually go into more detail on this, but I've talked about it a lot recently, and I don't know how many of you have already heard me or already heard Doug tell me on it. So that's all I'm going to say about caterpillars right now. So what else is going on in the canopy? Well, I'm going to start with oak mistletoe. I took this photo last week, and this is on the land I live on. And it's easy to see the clumps right now because it's winter, and this is a deciduous tree, so it doesn't have any leaves right now, but those clumps will become much less visible pretty soon. And this is a blue oak. And here is a closer look at some mistletoe clumps. So oak mistletoe is a hemiparasitic plant. That means it's partially parasitic. It can do some photosynthesizing. And it sends a root-like thing called an haustorium down into the branches and the trunk of hardwood trees, not only oaks, but some others as well, questing for minerals and nutrients. And it used to be thought to be a pest, but it is actually extremely important to ecosystems. In an Australian experiment, when their equivalent of our hardwood mistletoe was removed, 33% of the insects, birds, and mammals disappeared. The male flowers look like this, but this is greatly magnified. They are really only about 1 millimeter across. And Neil Kramer and I have been talking about it, and it's pretty tricky, but we're pretty sure he's pretty sure these are the male flowers. They bloom from July into September. And if you have a chance this summer, try looking at them with close focus binoculars or a hand lens, if you can find a clump that's low enough. These are the berries. And I don't know if these are still in flower form or if they're on their way to becoming berries, these little things right here. And the berries ripen in December, and they are rich in sugar and protein. I didn't realize that the berries persisted on plants until the end of March, but I took this photo just last week, and there they are over here. So mistletoe berries are eaten by at least 28 California bird species, and I name each of those birds in the ecology reference guide at the end of my oak mistletoe chapter. Other consumers are western gray squirrels and ringtails, of all things, who really love them, and in fact sort of preferentially hang out in places where mistletoe is. These are in the same family as raccoons, and they are a fully protected California species in California. I've never seen one. I'd be interested to hear if anyone has. You could put it in the chat, and if so, I'd like to hear what kind of habitat you saw it in. This photo was taken at Sutter Buttes, which is ringtail headquarters in California, as far as I know. And it was taken by Laura Lush, who's one of the principals in the organization Middle Mountain Interpretive Hikes. You can get into the Sutter Buttes, but you have to sign up with that organization. The land there is all privately owned. But back to this slide, see this leaf right here? I'm pointing at it with my pointer. It's in the far lower right corner. Well, it looks like it was munched by a caterpillar. That surprised me because there's only one butterfly. I only knew of one butterfly that, or one Lepidopteran species that used mistletoe as a host plant. But then I looked it up, and CalScape says there are 3 moths as well. So of course the issue is, can the caterpillars who process so much food in such a short time handle the protective chemicals of the plant? And by the way, mistletoe, don't try eating the berries. They're toxic to us. So the butterfly is this gorgeous great purple hair streak on the left, and these are its caterpillars on the right. I've actually never found a caterpillar, and you can see how well camouflaged they would be on mistletoe leaves. But now I want to start looking, and the way I would look, I find these close focus binoculars are fantastic for scanning things. Like I use them to scan milkweed for tiny caterpillars, so I can rescue them if need be. I sell these on my website, and they have completely changed my life. Right now, with flowers and insects coming on, you'd be able to see something like this longhorn fairy moth on a buttercup without even bending your knees. They focus within 20 inches, but also they focus to infinity. You can read about them on my website. This isn't a hard sell, but anything you buy from me helps support my education and advocacy work. So back to the subject of birds that consume mistletoe berries. This plant is so important to Western bluebirds that their winter family structure depends on it. Birds, these birds eat primarily insects most of the year, but then they switch to fruit and mainly mistletoe in the winter. And they actually have to change their, their location. They have to migrate a little bit to where their mistletoe berries are, because they own bluebird couples own their own mistletoe clumps. And what's really interesting about this species is that instead of driving what birders called their young of the year away, the offspring from the previous spring or the summer, instead of driving them out of their territory, like most songbirds do, they allow their sons and what are called immigrant females. And the immigrant females are the young of the year from another bluebird family. So it's kind of like they have foster daughters or foster, and the sons have foster siblings. And the sons and these immigrant females stay with the bluebirds all fall and winter and into the following spring. And lo and behold, the sons and the immigrant females often pair up in the spring, and the sons often then, or sometimes, not often, about 7% of the times, the sons help feed their parents their babies and defend their parents' nests, while also feeding their own babies and defending their nests. But that system of having these immigrant female men, it certainly seems like arranged marriage or trial marriage. And of course, the young females of our original family go and join a bluebird family. So mistletoe is also a great place to nest or hide from cold. And right here, you see my pointer, there is the eye of a robin parent sitting on this nest. So there's much more to say about mistletoe, but it's all in the chapter. So what else is going on in the canopy? Well, we know that scrub jays are up there collecting acorns in the fall, and caterpillars are up there in the spring and summer, munching away, and birds are foraging on them in droves. Is there anyone else up there foraging? Is there anyone up there foraging all year round? Well, yes, one such is woodrats. This big-eared woodrat has just spent much of the night up in the canopy of a coast live oak, which is another California endemic oak, foraging for food. So she found this sprig of coast live oak leaves, and she made a diagonal cut in it, and then she dropped it to the ground to be picked up later. And then she did that over and over again to a bunch of sprigs until she had as much as she needed. And then she went down to the ground, and now she's carrying it into her house. And I just want to mention that when you see a little sprig like that on the trail, pick it up, check it out. If it has a diagonal cut in the petiole, it's probably from a woodrat having left it there. So she might take it into the pantry where she stores oak and toyon leaves, or she might bring it to her bedroom where she actually already has a small supply of live oak leaves right here for midday snacks. She is nocturnal, so she sleeps during the day and goes up into the oak canopy at night. So after acorns, live oak leaves are her favorite food. These animals eat a huge variety of plant foods, but when available, acorns and live oak leaves are their favorite. I don't quite get the live oak leaf apart. They're so kind of brittle and prickly, usually prickly, but they've adapted to them. And oh, and as you can see by the shells in the corner here, she's also been eating acorns in bed. So both oak leaves and acorns are high in tannins, and tannins interfere with protein digestion. But she has special microorganisms in her gut that allow her to digest the tannins. And she doesn't know it, but she's the only mammal in the world who can live on a diet of oak leaves alone. She doesn't exactly thrive, but she survives. So after dropping the live oak leaves in her bedroom, she notices that she's out of bay laurel leaves, which she usually scatters around her bedroom to control fleas and other ectoparasites. So she heads back out to collect some, and on the way, she picks up an oak leaf that got over the hill before she ate it. She's very tidy. So here she is in the bay laurel patch, and she's going to take some of these leaves into her house and nibble their edges to release the volatile oils. So she's something of an herbalist as well as an architect, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then she will replace those bay leaves every 3 days. And by the way, she wishes you wouldn't think of her as a rat. A lot of people shorten the word woodrat to rat, and she is actually not a rat. She is much more like a giant mouse taxonomically. And she's a very humble giant mouse and doesn't realize that she builds the most complex above ground houses of any mammal in the world except for humans. In her house, she has a lot of pantries, each one dedicated to a particular kind of food, like one's for berries and one's for fungi and one's for acorns. There was a woodrat house in San Gabriel Mountains that had, I think it was 30 pounds of acorns in it. She has leaching rooms where she puts toxic leaves to outgas before she eats them. She has several sleeping rooms, and the safest of those is the birthing chamber, which is always under something solid that can't be pawed or scraped away by a badger or a bear or a coyote. She also has a special latrine area. She's very hygienic, and that's usually just outside the house. And all the rooms in her house are connected by corridors, and there are openings for light and air on each level. There are even terraces on the outside of the house where she can crouch and scan the landscape to see if it's safe. So she feels very comfortable in her house, but she actually knows that it's safer for her to have her babies up in the canopy where she's farther away from terrestrial predators like snakes, bobcats, foxes, coyotes, ringtails, badgers, everybody who's big enough, every carnivore who's big enough to eat a woodrat loves a meal of woodrat. And another reason for her to be farther up in the canopy is that in fall, when she's harvesting acorns, it's safer for her not to have to carry them so far. So at those times when she's having babies or when she's collecting acorns, she heads up to her tree house, which is about 10 feet up in a coast live oak. So woodrats are active in the canopy all year round, foraging only on vegetable matter, including leaves, acorns, fungi, and their houses are very attractive to uninvited guests who live in the peripheral parts. There are even snakes in the peripheral parts of their houses, usually the ones on the ground. So because of this, woodrats are considered a keystone species. That's because wherever they are, the abundance and diversity of animal species increases. And another reason is that they're very important to the ecosystem because they are eaten by so many species, and they are actually the favorite food of the California spotted owl. And I'm not sure what the status of this bird is right now. I know Trump delisted it, and I hope it's in the process of being relisted as endangered. So are there other mammals that live or forage in the oak canopy year-round? Well, yes, squirrels. And one of those is the western gray squirrel. These squirrels are so common that we sometimes forget to appreciate them. So, oh, hold on a minute. I'm going to read to you from the beginning of my book on that subject, but I don't have it here. Just a sec. So this is just to help you remember how wonderful western gray squirrels are. When you see swaying branches high up in the oak canopy on a windless day, prepare to watch heart-stopping acrobatics. A western gray squirrel may be bounding from branch to branch 60 or 80 feet overhead. These daring gymnasts sometimes leap across 20-foot chasms to land on finger-sized twigs that careen wildly under their weight and occasionally break. Other times, the graceful athletes seem to float through the treetops, shining tails undulating like waves behind them. So this squirrel, it was a hot day in June when I took this picture, and this squirrel was lying on a wide limb of an interior live oak near my yurt. That's another California endemic oak. You can see how he's splayed out, and that's a way of cooling off because the oak conducts away some of his body heat. And you can also see that his tail was over his back as a sunshade. Oh, I mean, you didn't know that, but you could see that his tail was over his back, and that's because it's both a sunshade and camouflage to hide the shape of his body from aerial predators. Acorns are a huge part of a western gray squirrel's annual diet, 33% annually. And he also forages in oaks for catkins and leaf buds and mistletoe berries. And all of those are happening right now. So if you went outside and had some time to observe, you might see a squirrel foraging on those things. He also forages in oak canopies for insects, lizards, bird eggs, baby birds, and many other organisms that I list in the ecology reference guide that's at the end of each of the chapters of my book, or most of them. And if poison oak happens to be climbing up an oak tree, you might see this squirrel clinging to the oak or to the poison oak vines and systematically eating poison oak seeds, which are officially called drupes, D-R-U-P-E-S, one by one. Squirrels love them. Like scrub jays, this squirrel stores acorns in the ground, but unlike them, he doesn't carry them very far from the mother tree. So he doesn't help much to populate or repopulate the land with oaks. So would you like to hear about the 11 functions of the gray squirrel's tail? I just shared 2 with you, sunshade and camouflage. But there are 9 more. I won't quiz you on them though. The most important one is balance. It helps him balance as he careens through the oak canopy or runs along fences. But it also serves, when this tail is in that same position over his back, it serves an umbrella if it's raining, a blanket if it's cold, and then in other positions, his tail, if he falls out of a tree, which he does sometimes, it acts as a parachute. It slows his fall. And I don't actually know what position it's in when that's happening. Maybe it's also over his back. And then just before he hits the ground, he flips it under his body so it becomes a cushion to cushion his fall. When he's up in the canopy, if he flicks it, it is a warning to other squirrels and or to predators. And if he's being attacked, say by a hawk, he waves it to divert the hawk away from his head and torso. And if someone, such as the hawk, grabs his tail, he can actually drop it at will if necessary. I don't know if any of you have ever found a neatly disconnected squirrel tail, but I have. It also serves as a rudder if he is swimming, and also it increases his buoyancy. So it's a flotation device when he swims. So one day I was driving up my little dirt road and there was a squirrel munching on something in an oak right next to the road. And I had my camera and I rolled down my window. So next we're going to see a video of a squirrel eating something. So see if you can tell what it is. I can't. And also see if you can identify the bird that's calling in the background. And for some reason, the image doesn't show up until I press the play button. It's a little kind of frustratingly short, so I'll play it one more time. Okay, do you know what bird that was? That was a California quail. So I'm going to get to more vertebrate species later, such as acorn woodpeckers and fence lizards. But right now we're going to do a big change and talk about something we can see, another kind of thing we can see in the canopy all year, which is these structures. These are called galls, and they were produced by this Oregon oak at the command of a wasp the size of a fruit fly, because she needed nurseries for her larvae and pupae to go through their life cycles in safely. So the holes, these holes were made by birds trying to get to the larvae inside so they could eat them. Galls are induced, is the word, by a lot of different species of gall wasps. And this gall is the largest one in the West. These are actually condos. They have multiple larval chambers in them. And so this was induced by the California gall wasp. And now this wasp is actually the size of a fruit fly. So it's highly magnified here for your viewing pleasure. She is, okay, so, and just so one more thing about that in this species, no males have ever been found. It's possible that they reproduce entirely parthenogenically by egg division? I'm not clear on that, but okay, so here we have 3 other kinds of galls, each having at least one larval chamber. I think these only have one each. And each of these is induced on this valley oak by a different species of wasp. Not each one, but each kind. So these bright pink ones are induced by the spined turban gall wasp. These little ones are induced by the red cone gall wasp. And this right here is, this is the convoluted gall wasp. And these only occur on the mid-veins of leaves, or at least the leaves of veins. I don't know if they're always the mid-veins. So you notice I said this was produced on on this valley oak, but I didn't take this photograph. So how do I know that this is a valley oak, that these are valley oak leaves? Well, actually, it isn't totally obvious that they're valley oak leaves at first glance, and I could tell you why. They look like they have a little bit of Oregon oak in them. But when I noticed this gall, Andricus confertus, the convoluted gall wasp, I knew that it was a valley oak, because convoluted gall wasps lay their eggs only on valley oaks. So I've created some oak identification guides. And in addition to showing classic acorns and classic leaves, this is the white oak group side. So they're Valley, Oregon blue, and California scrub oaks on this side. These are laminated guides. And down here on the bottom row, I show the galls, the only galls that are known to occur on only one species of oak, or sometimes two. I think this one occurs on two. So here is that convoluted oak gall, and we are in the valley oak column. On the other side, these are the red oaks and golden oaks, and there's only one gall that occurs on only one oak species right here. So you can find a link for these guides on my homepage. And one thing that's, okay, so this is the crystalline gall on a blue oak. These are, which I can tell because these are blue oak leaves. And blue oaks are host to 41 gall wasp species. But, so they're a really fun place to go on gall treasure hunts in the fall. But this creature up here isn't a gall wasp. I thought at first that it was a gall wasp exiting, because they pupate in there and then they eat their way out of the gall. But this is a parasitic wasp who is preparing to insert her ovipositor into the larval chamber where the gall wasp larvae are. And she's hoping to hit an actual larva. So those larvae are peacefully eating and sleeping and or molting and napping in there, and suddenly they're going to feel a sting and an egg will be laid in them. And then when that egg hatches out, the larva will eat the body of the gall wasp larva. So there's a whole suite of parasitic wasps that do that to the gall wasp larvae. And then there's a whole suite of super parasitic wasps that do that to the parasitic wasps. So there's a ton more about galls and gall wasps in my chapter, and it's a really fun read, but let's get back to the oak canopy. Lace lichen, or Ramalina menziesii, is our state lichen. And it's not Spanish moss, and it's the only lichen in North America with a lace-like structure, which is here greatly magnified. So this lace collects dust that's carried on wind that blows in from the ocean. That dust from the ocean is full of nitrogen and bits of organic material and thousands of particles of sodium and chlorine salts. And in fact, a lace lichen structure has evolved in response to its proximity to the Pacific Ocean. You won't find lace lichen hanging from trees that are more than 40 or 50 or maybe 60 miles from the ocean. So in fall or winter, what happens? So these these are covered with this dust from the ocean, full of all that stuff. And then rain comes along and washes all those nutrients to the ground, fertilizing the tree. And then bits of lichen also fall and fertilize the tree. So trees and shrubs that are festooned with lace lichen grow faster than trees that don't. People always think it's harming trees because they see it on dead limbs, but it's on dead limbs because the algae and cyanobacteria that are inside the lichen, the fungal part of the lichen, are need light to photosynthesize. So birds nest in these hanks or swatches inside them sometimes of lace lichen when they're nice and thick. And there's a species called the Hutton's vireo that makes these pendant nests, and it breeds in the Coast Range. It breeds only in areas where lace lichen exists. Now, I couldn't actually find a picture of one that was made of entirely of lace lichen, because this one is also made of Usnea longissima, which is a lace lichen look-alike. It's light green and it's droopy. And here is a red-shouldered hawk nest, and there's some lace lichen here as well as some Usnea. And in this photo, this is the dad, and he is delivering an alligator lizard to his mate, to the mom, and then she's going to tear it up and feed it to her baby. I kept a diary of this nest for 6 weeks. It occurred in a black oak right near me, and my friend John Klein photographed it. Here is the mom delivering an alligator lizard tail to her chick. And you may, I don't know if any of you are birders, but you may have seen this story. It was a cover story in Birders World in 2007. So there's much more to say about lace lichen, but it also has a chapter in my book. And so we're still in the canopy, although these pictures were taken in the low part of the canopy. And few people know this, but spiders are the second most important prey animal for songbirds after insects. And of course, spiders are carnivores, so they depend on insects themselves. This is the two-tiered web of a bowl and doily spider, and right here is the spider hanging out. It's hard to see though. And here's another view of one of these webs, and there's another spider right here. So these webs are considered to be one of the great engineering feats of the world by some engineers. There's all this mesh work up here, and I don't quite know why it's such a great feat, but what I'm interested in is the fact that spider silk, spiders are important as food for birds, but spider silk is also extremely important for songbirds, for nest building. The mama hummingbird who built this nest on an oak limb used silk all through it. Silk is elastic and sticky, and it allows the nest to expand as the babies grow. And the stickiness allows the female, the mama, to just stick things on it, like whatever is growing on the branch that she's building the nest on, whatever epiphytes are there, lichens and moss in this case, so that it will be well camouflaged. And then, so she'll stick some on, then she adds more silk, then she sticks more stuff on, and that's how it becomes thick. And there's another bird, the blue-gray gnatcatcher, that builds a very similar nest, but much bigger. And they too are so full of spider silk that if you touch them, it's kind of like touching custard or jello. So since I'm on to birds now, I'm going to mention a very important oak woodland bird, the Cooper's hawk. It's a big jump from hummingbirds and blue-gray gnatcatchers, but these are the quintessential raptors of the oak woodlands, of California's oak woodlands anyway. So much so that their populations fluctuate with the acorn crop because many of their prey animals depend on acorns. One example is quail. These are Cooper's hawks are the terror of California quail, and they prey mainly on birds. And many Cooper's hawks have now moved into cities because there's so many birds there, like pigeons and starlings and English sparrows, that they can pick off. But the ones who still live in oak woodlands, a whopping 97% nest in oak trees. And their preference is live oaks because of the density of the canopy, I think. I'm watching one right now. You see these two little heads up here peeking over? So Cooper's hawks have short wings so they can fly through foliage and not bump into it, and foliage corridors, and they have long tails for steering and turning. They act like rudders, but their navigation abilities aren't perfect because in a quarter of Cooper's hawks who were examined, they had healed fractures of their breast bones. Usually their, their wishbone. So I don't know how many bird species nest in oak canopies. I've never seen a figure for that, but at least 30 bird species eat acorns, and others forage on oaks for anything from oak catkins to spiders to insects to frogs, lizards, and rodents, while others hunt from perches on oaks. So altogether, 262 bird species rely on California's oak woodlands, and I'm sure most of them, if not all of them, actually have something to do with oaks themselves, not just other plants in the oak woodlands. And California's oak woodlands have greater animal abundance and diversity than any other terrestrial habitat in California. It may not be just animal abundance. I think it's abundance period of plants and fungi and everything else. So one of those 30 acorn species that I mentioned is probably the most visible, eccentric, vocal, and iconic bird of California's oak woodlands, the acorn woodpecker. These birds are ecologically not particularly important because they don't plant oaks, except occasionally if a limb with oaks in it falls to the ground. But they're important because they excavate lots and lots of nest cavities, more than they need usually. And those eventually get abandoned and they become nesting sites and shelter for the cavity nesting birds who are called secondary cavity nesters, who aren't equipped to dig out their own cavities. Bluebirds are an example of that, and oak titmice. And then those cavities also get used by squirrels and woodrats and arboreal salamanders and lizards and snakes and others. So here is a woodpecker sticking his head out of one of those cavities, and I can tell this is a male because there's no black band between the red and the white on his head. And this one, I can't tell the sex, but this one is probably waiting to possibly take a turn incubating eggs or brooding nestlings. This may be a changing of the guard. And this nest cavity is on the underside of a a black oak branch. And the tree it was on came down this year. So many trees are falling this year. And now I can't resist showing you a video I took last summer of an acorn woodpecker chick who will be leaving the nest pretty soon. You can see a little bit of black through the red on his head, and his gape right here shows that he's not quite entirely mature. He or she, young birds all look like males, so there's never a black band on a young bird. So he or she is full of curiosity about this big new world outside the nest cavity. And this nest cavity is about, I don't know, 20 or 30 feet up. The video is frustratingly short, but after I play it, I'm going to try to slow it down for you manually. Let's see. Here we go. I just grin every time I watch that. So let's see if I can do it now more slowly, then stop it sometimes. Amazing how he or she can turn their head up that way. Whoops. I guess I lost it. Oh, maybe that was the end. No. Okay. Okay. So I'd also like you to know how remarkable acorn woodpeckers are in ways that aren't particularly related to their ecosystem contributions. They are the only birds in the world known to drill individual holes in trees to store individual food items. And these storage units are called acorn granaries. And the social structure of acorn woodpeckers is more complex than that of any vertebrate species in the world, including us humans. They live in clans of up to 16 birds, and they do almost everything communally. So this is a diagram I made of their family structure. They have unique permanent communal marriages of up to 10 birds. Any one of these are the females in the marriage. They're up to 3, usually just 1 or 2. And these are the males, and they're up to 7, but usually fewer. And any one of the females can mate with any one of the males, and vice versa. These females all lay their eggs in the same cavity nest, which creates some interesting tensions and responses to the tensions that I write about in my chapter. The clan also includes these birds who are their offspring. They're called non-breeding helpers, and they stay with their parents and with the granary, that's key, for up to 5 years. They can't afford to leave. They have to have a granary because without it, they would starve in the winter. And so the whole clan does everything communally, storing and consuming acorns. Any bird can eat any acorn from the granary at any time. The females all share one nest. Everyone helps care for the nestlings. They all sleep together in stuffy, cramped tree cavities. And siblings compete together for breeding vacancies. So first, I'll talk about breeding vacancies in a minute, but first, what do I mean by permanent communal marriage? Well, if this bird dies or disappears, she will not be replaced. If this bird dies or disappears, she will not be replaced. No new female will come into the marriage. So the sole remaining bird will be the only female left, except by now some of these males might have disappeared also. So it's only when this female dies or disappears, that there is now a breeding vacancy and new females can come into the marriage. And that involves raucous, cacophonous fights by coalitions of, in this case, female non-breeding helpers from other clans. And when I have a live audience, I get people from the audience to come up and we act this out, but you're just going to have to read about it in my chapter. So I'm going to move on now to another bird that is associated with oaks. And I'm wondering if you know that wood ducks are dependent on oaks and spend part of their time, at least, in the higher reaches of them. So right now, well, it's not still winter, but in fall and winter, 75% of this bird's diet is, guess what? Acorns. Like scrub jays, wood ducks have co-evolved with oaks, or at least evolved with oaks. I don't know if there's any reciprocation from the oaks themselves, but they've evolved with oaks. They've adapted to being around oaks. And their bill shape has evolved not for tugging acorns off of trees, but for scooping them up off the ground or the water and carrying them in their bills. So, but they don't have teeth, so they don't have pointy bills that can break them open. So using his tongue, this bird is going to work the acorn to the back of his throat into his esophagus, which is extremely elastic. He'll store up to 20 to 30 acorns in there. And I think that's what this is. This is stuffed with acorns. And he'll then let them pass down through his stomach into his gizzard, where they will get ground up by sand and pebbles that he has ingested just for that purpose. And because wood ducks are designed for living in the woods, that's where they get their name, wood ducks. They are the only ducks that have sharp claws on their feet that allow them to stand on something like this, to grip bark and perch on branches. Imagine most ducks' feet, they just slide off. Wood ducks also have short wings, which enable them to fly through narrow spaces without getting caught on branches, as I was saying, Cooper's hawks have. They have really big eyes that allow a lot of light in, so they have keen eyesight for navigating in dim light under the tree canopy, and they have very slender bodies that enables them to nest in tree cavities. So this is a female wood duck. See how well she blends in. So there's much more about wood ducks, and I have a slideshow called Extraordinary Ordinary Birds of California's Oak Woodlands, and in that I go into great detail about what happens when the babies that come out of this nest and how they become skydivers and quad athletes, I call them, instead of triathletes. So now I'm going to talk about some species that we see mainly on the woody part of oaks, such as nuthatches, who forage in bark crevices on their way up the trunk, and they forage in bark crevices on their way down the trunk. And on the way down, they get a different view into the crevices and can find things that their competitors, the creepers, can't find because they always go up. And actually that means they're not very competitive. They actually get, they coexist on tree trunks because the nuthatches can go down and find different things. The lichens and mosses on tree trunks also harbor organisms, but some of those organisms are right out in plain sight, such as this caterpillar that is disguised as a lichen. I just love this. I thought at first this was a caterpillar, but it's not. It's a lichen that just got pulled off. So king snakes and gopher snakes and rattlesnakes all travel up and down tree trunks and branches often looking for bird nests. And another reptile, western fence lizards, bask and forage on tree trunks and bask and forage on them for spiders and ants and ticks and caterpillars and many other arthropods. Some fence lizards spend most of their lives up in oak trees. And curiously, they often fall or dive out of the oak tree and end up on the ground, to the tune of 5,000 a year on one oak-covered acre. No one knows why they're overshooting their prey, or no one knows if they're overshooting their prey or if they're possibly deliberately diving to escape predators. I think it's probably the latter. I doubt that they overshoot their prey. And if they get lost on an oak tree, do you know how they find their way back to where they wanted to go? They have a third eye that is right under this spot between the bones of their skull. This is a skylight that allows light into that eye, and that eye is connected to the pineal gland, and it has a lens and a retina and most of the stuff that regular eyes have, and it reads the pattern of light that's created when the sun's light hits the Earth's atmosphere and polarizes. That creates a pattern, and that eye that eye reads the pattern and keeps track. So you can read more in my chapter about how that works. If it loses the use of this eye and has only its lateral eyes, it will get lost. If it has only this eye and not the lateral eyes, it will find its way home. So oaks also have natural cavities, and this is one that a titmouse has been nesting in for the past couple of years. Here is a painting of a titmouse coming out of its nest cavity carrying a fecal sac. This is what little baby birds poop in, little membranous bags, and then the parents remove them to keep the nest clean. This is Anne McGlinty's painting of a screech owl, the very one that I watched for 4 hours straight one day without taking my binoculars off of it. And it's in an Oregon oak. And John Klein took a photo of it, and then Anne painted it. This is maybe my favorite painting in the book. And I want to finish by thanking the first peoples of this land for the love and skillful and appropriate care they gave to the land, and particularly to oaks and oak woodlands for thousands of years before they were prevented from doing so. And I want to thank them for their tenacity and courage in continuing to assert their rights now, and in some cases, educating anyone who's interested in the traditional ways and the traditional understandings and perspectives of the land. This is Corinne Pierce, who lives in Redwood Valley near me, and she's an amazing basket weaver and teacher, and teaches classes in processing acorn and basket making. And I'm grateful for the work Native people are doing now with agencies in protecting waterways like the Klamath River, and restoring and protecting sacred sites, and so much more. I hope all of you, native and non-native, will not only plant at least one oak in your yard and cage it against rodents and deer, but also plant other native plants. And I hope you will also work to protect mature oaks from being razed to the ground. The loss, as you know now, if you didn't before, the loss of a mature oak is inestimable, and mitigating the loss of an oak by planting 10 acorns is just absolutely ludicrous. And that's what I'm working on right now. Our county supervisors are trying to open up 714,000 acres of fragile rangelands to corporate cannabis growing, and I'm fighting it tooth and nail. So we could turn off the video now. I just wanted to say again that I'm on the verge of losing we don't have to though, losing my home of 20 years on the land that gave birth to my book, which includes this gorgeous, it's a reservoir, but it's been here for, since 1964. And there's a 1 acre wetland back here that's very healthy and supports a lot of species, and tules and cattails all around the edge. And one of the reasons that my landlords are having to sell is related to the influx of corporate cannabis money in our county. So I'm hoping to find conservation-minded buyers to purchase this 160 acres. And there are also 2 more parcels at this end of the lake that would ideally be purchased as well. We call it a lake and we swim in it all summer. So the asking price, if you happen to know anybody with a 2.2 million lying around, is, well, 2.2 million. That's for 160 acres. And there are 4 structures on it that are permitted dwelling units, and a bunch of other structures that are detached bedrooms and other kinds of living units. So that's all for now. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to the question and answer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much for that beautiful tribute to not only the oaks and all of their cohabitants, but also to the original peoples here. Very much appreciated. There are some questions in here. There is a lot in the chat. People have been chatting and with a lot of gratitude, especially at the end. But some of the questions go back miles.
It's hard to keep track of them, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'll try and sort through. The first question from Margaret Martinson is, can you speak to the non-native grasses inhabiting oak regeneration? You know anything about this?
I'll say they are, and they do. The annual grasses that have come in from, I guess, mostly Europe, they suck up water and they shade out seedlings that come up. They just crowd them out. And when there were the native grasses, the native bunch grasses, also the non-native grasses create a layer of sod that, or sometimes do. And if an acorn lands on that sod and then it starts to put its radicle down, sometimes the radical dries out before it reaches actual soil, or yeah, I guess the soil and the water that it needs. And the non-native grasses put down roots that are sometimes as deep as 20 feet. The bunch grasses, did I say the non-native? The bunch grasses, the native bunch grasses put down roots that go down as far as 20 feet sometimes. So they're not competing with oak seedlings and any other native plant seedlings for water. So California's hills used to be gray-green instead of brown in the summer, because the native grasses, they didn't lose water and dry out in the summer. And I think they were less flammable. So anything we can do to get rid of annual grasses is very, very beneficial. And when we plant oak seedlings, we not only have to protect them with an inner, here's how my advisors on this, here's what they recommend. A cage, a wire cage, like a wire mesh cage that is in a cylinder shape and maybe about 4 inches or 5 inches or maybe even 6 inches in diameter, and you put it down about 6 inches into the ground. That's for rodents, and you put a bottom on it so rodents can't come up through it. But it's possible that that's not a good idea. It should be a pretty a bottom with, like if it's chicken wire, maybe 1-inch chicken wire, so the oak roots won't get constricted by wire. Then you put another cage around it that might be 16 inches in diameter, and that is for deer. So it has to have openings in it that are too small for deer's muzzles to get through, if that's what deer's mouths are called. And then what you want to do is you have to weed it every once in a while to get rid of the annual grasses that might be coming up either inside your cage or on the outside of the cage. And the first year or the first couple of years, you might give your seedlings a gallon or 2 of water per month in the dry season. I answered much more than what the question was. I don't did I answer the question.
Okay. Yes, you did. I think that was a thorough answer. Thank you. Are moths and butterflies attracted to young oaks less than mature oaks? My guess would be yes, but I don't know this.
I think so. I don't see them around young oaks very much, but then the problem is we don't have a lot of young oaks these days. Even the ones that look young are often pretty old because they've had to survive munching by deer so much. So, you know, an oak can be 4 feet high and be 100 years old. But I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect that that's true.
Fair enough. I'm sure there's someone out there that has that answer, and we can research it.
Yeah.
So someone asked, and this is kind of curious. I don't think I've ever seen this either. Acorn woodpeckers. You ever see they'll make a nest hoe in one of their granary trees? I think they keep those separate. It seems like
No, they do a lot. I've seen
okay.
nest holes, and often they have 2 nest holes, one above the other, a foot or 2 above, so they have 2 entrances because often the tree is hollow for quite a distance. But yeah, I've seen them in nest trees.
Cool. Some people have some suggestions for possible new owners for the land in here, but
Right.
And yeah, so I won't give those away. I'll just share those with you.
Okay.
Someone said if they won the lotto, they would definitely buy it. But can you tell us about the photo of you with the acorn woodpecker on your shoulder?
Oh, yeah. So I don't know how many of you have heard of Hastings Natural History Reservation. It's a large piece of land in Carmel Valley where a lot of research has been done. It's an outpost of UC Berkeley. And I visited there once when I was in the area giving a talk, and I met an acorn woodpecker who had been injured, had a wing injury, and his name was Almost because he could almost fly. At that site, you can't keep wild animals, even injured ones, legally unless they have an educational unless they're being used for educational purposes. So they were using him for educational purposes, and somebody put him on my arm and he just walked right up to my shoulder, and my friend Carol was with me and she took about 50 photographs and got a good one.
Sweet, sweet. So someone asked, any ideas that this may be a little bit out of your area, but asking about how to protect young oaks planted as street trees in the city.
Oh,
The harsh environment.
I'm really glad to hear that they're being planted as street trees. Our town doesn't want them as street trees because, you know, they can become problematic with age. But, well, I guess you wouldn't have to worry about rodents and deer. So what are you protecting them from in a city? Humans?
Yeah, well, we have a big problem with wind here too. Unfortunately, you know, there's all sorts of, we here in San Francisco, the poor street trees, they weren't really, you know, here until the 50s and 60s, and they weren't really thinking a whole lot about it. Anything that would grow, they'd put it in, you know. So
you have oaks as street trees?
we've been asking the city to move towards live oak primarily, and they have done quite a bit of experimentation, you know, with all the microclimates here in San Francisco. On some areas, especially the east side of town, they can do quite well. Over in the sandy areas, not quite so much, but you know, it's all you know, experimental at this stage, I'd say.
Well, that would, coast live oaks as street trees would be so beautiful. I just noticed that somebody mentioned my acorn earrings, so I'm going to show them off.
Nice.
I made these. These
Oh,
are the blue oak acorns.
the most delicious kind, I've heard.
You have? Huh.
I've heard that the blue oak acorns were a favorite.
Well, you know, what I understand is that it just depends on what family you grew up in. If your family grew up eating blue oaks, then they were your favorite.
Okay.
But in general, like around here, the Pomo people here who had access to either black oak or tan oak prefer those.
Oh, okay. Cool. So,
In the present.
there's a question about woodrats that they were wondering about gender roles because you only referred to females.
Yeah, and that was because females are, so there's usually only one woodrat living in one of those houses. Even a house that's 8 feet high will only have one woodrat living in it, except if she has babies, or sometimes she might allow another female to live there for a while, or sometimes she might have a lover who lives there for a while, but as soon as she gets pregnant, she'll kick him out. So males tend to be moving around a lot looking for females to mate with. And so females tend to live in the more, the larger and you know, more upscale houses. So I was assuming that house was occupied by a female because it was pretty big and complex. And each house is the product of many generations of woodrats working on it. And I didn't say this, but sometimes one female woodrat owns and controls, I think it's 7 or 8 houses. And they get used as, they get passed on to her offspring. Some of them get used as communal meeting houses, things like that, and storage places.
Far out. Hey, I'll give you one more if you're good with that. People along the woodrat trend, people are curious if SOD, sudden oak death, spores might be getting moved by woodrats. I know bay laurel is considered a vector. Would
Yeah.
that possibly be as well? I suppose so.
Yeah, they do eat, let's see. So they do eat young bay laurel leaves. And of course they move them into their houses for fumigants. And they probably would move any sticks if they needed bay laurel, branches that were lying around on the ground for building their houses. Yes, they would not avoid them because of Phytophthora ramorum, but they don't carry things very far. So they wouldn't be moving them miles or even a kilometer or even, 300 feet, I think. I don't think.
Right. Yes. Well, Kate, thank you so much for this delicious talk. It was really, really a sincere pleasure to hear it. And we hope to connect with you again sometime in the near future, hopefully in person.
Yes, I hope so.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
be sharing we'll be sharing this recording with participants on our YouTube chapter that you can get to from our website. And also I'll be sharing chat information with you, Kate.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Adios.
Wish I could have talked to you in person or heard you in person.
Soon, we hope. Take care. Bye.